Yeah, so Craig, as well, first off, thanks again for being here. As Calvin, I think, mentioned, a group of us, maybe five or six of us in the call, recently read through your book, Modern Technology and the Human Future, and had a discussion group going with that. And I think all really enjoyed it and learned a lot from it. Um, so yeah, we'd really appreciate to hear like your thoughts on it, and your sort of experience that led you to write the book, and just maybe your background and sort of what the thesis of the book is and how Christians really should be thinking about technology. Um, so just for everyone else, some background on Craig. He's a professor at Regent College, where he was Calvin professor, I believe. And he has a PhD from Boston University, and has written, besides this book on technology, many other books on a variety of things related to society and secularization and these sorts of things from a Christian perspective. And I believe, according to the preface of the book, your dad was a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. So you have some background in these sorts of things. And yeah, we'd love to hear what you have to say. I think we'll start if you could just maybe talk for like however long you want to, maybe 20 minutes, or feel free to talk more or less depending on what you have prepared. And then if we'll just open the floor for questions. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks, Andrew. Um, yeah, I mean, I think what I'll do, I've got some comments that I put together for an interview that I did last year, which I'm looking at them now and wondering how long it's going to take to get through them. Um, it may be a little too much, but let me just start using those. Um, I think there are all kinds of different ways to get into this topic, but one of the most common questions that people ask about technology is about specific technologies. What about this or that? Should we use it? Is this or that technology good or bad? And they're good questions, but I think what we need to know or need to understand is that we don't stand any chance of answering these sorts of questions unless we know what kinds of people we are trying to become. Put a little bit differently, unless we know where we were trying to go, there's really no way of knowing if this or that technology is going to help us to get there. Now, the book is concerned to address, technology in general, and more specifically, the challenges posed by the ongoing development of what I call automatic machine technology. But even more importantly, I think the book attempts to model what a Christian theological engagement with modern technology might look like. I don't think it's the last word, but I hope that it will start the conversation. I think we're living in an age of theological amnesia, in which core Christian truths and the implications that stem from them are not being discussed in the churches. And this book attempts to model what such a discussion might look like in respect to modern technology. Now, the specific thesis of the book is that technological development is trending away from ordinary embodied human existence. And I think this is a problem, and it's a problem that needs to be discussed. But in many ways, a much more serious problem is that this development seems to flow out of or stem from our own distorted understanding of what the world is, as well as our place within it as human beings. And as long as we are viewing the world as simply material, as simply stuff, and as long as we believe ourselves to be free to use this stuff that we find in the world more or less as we see fit, we won't stand any chance of redirecting modern technology back toward more humane and fruitful ends, I don't think. Now, what seems to propel modern technological development is the age-old aspiration after control, but it is control achieved in a particularly modern way, and that is by means of the findings of modern science. But in addition to that, because you can't, well, I mean, it stems from the matter of control. You can't control what you can't measure. And of course, this explains modern science's emphasis upon precision measurement, which itself requires technological development. But of course, the universal measuring rod is money. And so modern technological development is crucially driven today by cost-profit calculations in the directions of cost efficiency or cost effectiveness and efficiency. And this tends to explain the modern drive toward homogeneity, standardization, one-size-fits-all solutions to a variety of problems. And it also explains the emphasis upon communications technologies, information processing, and automation. All of these are pushed along by basically cost-profit calculations. Now, all of these, I think, can usefully be understood and linked under the heading of a process that social scientists, following Max Weber, have called rationalization, which is a process animated by the belief, which again rests on this kind of mechanical worldview, that we can, that it will be possible for us to master the world, master all things really, by calculation. I've got a great quote here from a British journalist named Brian Appleyard, and he's examining the impact of new machinery on us. He says it doesn't really matter whether new machines ever achieve full human-like consciousness or even real intelligence. They could almost certainly achieve just enough to do your job. Not as well as you, perhaps, but much, much more cheaply. Now, to modernize John Ruskin, who was a 19th century commentator, there is hardly anything in the world that some robot cannot make a little worse and sell a little cheaper. And the people who consider price only are this robot's lawful prey. Anyway, I talk a lot about money in the book and the impact that money and monetary calculations have on technological development. I'm trying to think how much of this I should go into. Let's see. Okay, well, let me go into this next section. We'll just ask the question, what is technology? It's a good question. Let's call it the development of practical tools or contrivances or machines and or processes for the sake of improving or trying to improve the quality of life. And the examples which come from basically all of human history. Cooking as an example of technology, leading to homemaking and sociability. Clothing and textiles, enabling us to indwell more of our world's environments. Transportation, again, enabling us to wander in and experience our world. Artistic expressions, technological expressions, expanding our capacity for wonder and spirituality. Agriculture, communications, medical, I mean, the list is long. Basically, technology lifts us out of the immediacy and tyranny of natural existence. it enables us to gain a kind of necessary distance from nature. And this enables us to know nature and to think about it and to rearrange and cultivate it, and ultimately to use it. Um, Now, all the while, and for the most part, historically, our technologies have left us vitally connected to our world. Um, our technologies should, and very often have, enabled us to become more of ourselves, more human, more conscious, more deeply reflective, more present to each other, more engaged with reality. Um, so technology is a basic human enterprise, and it's we've been doing this for as long as we've been human. Um, Modern technology, though, seems to be slightly different. The most concise definition that I suppose I can imagine is it's the systematic application of scientific knowledge to practical tasks. Um, and my concern with modern technology, and specifically with automatic machine technology, is that for some reason it's not making us more human. It's not enabling us to become more reflective or more present to each other, or more engaged with our world. Rather, it seems, for reasons that we'll have to discuss, it seems to be diminishing us, even as it promises to do more and better and faster and cheaper and so forth. And of course, we're surrounded by examples of this. The harried pace of modern life, as we are forced to adapt to machine systems and rhythms. The elimination of places, specific local places for the sake of commercialized space. The dizzying pace of change. The looming problem of what has been called technological unemployment, that is the replacement of people with machinery. A whole variety of disorders of attachment and attention, and actually some fairly serious mental health illnesses that are unique to our modern technological society. Open up any newspaper today and you'll read about these sorts of concerns. For some reason, it seems that we're allowing our technologies, our modern technologies at least, to interpose themselves between us and reality in such a way as to break or disrupt the relations that we have between ourselves and creative nature, between ourselves and each other, and between ourselves and even between ourselves and our own bodies. And the question is, why are we allowing this to happen? Why are we not more concerned about it? And why are we not putting up more of a protest? And then say we do become concerned, what can we do? I mean, anyway, these are the kinds of questions I raise and then try to ask or answer in the book. Anyway, so maybe that's to have said enough. I mean, I basically am trying to convince the reader that there is a problem. The problem is the trending away from ordinary embodied human being that we see with modern technological development. I try to suggest why this has happened. And that's where, we talk about the economic issues and also the history of ideas stuff. And then I try to suggest, how to respond to this Christianly, how to think about it Christianly. And I do that under the heading of the rediscovery of the implications of the several sort of basic Christian doctrines, the doctrine of creation, of incarnation, and then of resurrection. Now I'm skipping down here to the end. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I think, let me go back to where I began. I think for a variety of reasons, responding Christianly to modern technology would be helped if we could raise the question of, again, of ends or purposes. Where are we trying to go? Who are we trying to become? What, you know, what kinds of human beings do we desire to become? What are genuinely human purposes? How are genuinely human purposes most judiciously attained? Well, just raising these kinds of questions today is to be salt and light within our contemporary culture. And then, anyway, being prepared to answer them in light of core Christian understandings of incarnation and creation and so forth. It should help us. It should help us to be more of a witness within this technological society that we live in. So I know that's a bit disjointed, but let's leave it at that.
Thank you, Craig. I wonder if you could just say like a couple more words on sort of how this actually works in terms of applying these doctrines of incarnation and redemption to these things, and like how we should think about these as Christians.
Well, I mean, one of the theses that's out there concerning human development is that, you know, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, it's the notion, the transhumanist notion that it is our, you know, the next phase of our evolution to evolve out of our bodies and into machinery. And, you know, that's an extreme kind of sort of vision of this future. But in the meantime, it means that we're not, well, how do you put it? We're excited, I guess, about the possibilities of technological enhancement of human being. And okay, that's interesting, and it's yeah, I mean it's a reasonable kind of thesis to forward. So how do we think about that Christianly? And then it raises the question of, well, what does it mean to be a human being, and can we envision what the ideal human being might look like? And it isn't long before you think, well, yeah, actually we can, because that turns out to be one of the core doctrines of the Christian faith, that God actually became one of us in Christ, and lived among us, dwelt among us, as the Apostle John says. And then we also have evidence of this astounding endorsement of ordinary embodied human being, or what I call ordinary embodied human being, in the resurrection of Christ from the dead. The resurrected Christ is not transhuman. He is, you know, basically fully embodied human being who, you know, walks along the road to Emmaus with his disciples, converses with them, reasons with them, you know, enters into conversation. He eats with them by the Sea of Galilee. He does very ordinary things with people, face to face, fully embodied. And I think, I mean, now there are other aspects of this that are mysterious. The fact that he seems to be able to appear and disappear, and so forth. So, you know, we'd have to we'd have to talk about that. But the the basic thought is that this is an endorsement of ordinary embodied human interaction, and that this is not a limitation. It's not a something that we have to use technology to overcome, or a problem that must somehow be solved by way of technology. Actually encountering each other in face-to-face interaction, conversations, sharing meals together, walking together, I mean, doing all of these things, this has received in Christ the most astonishing endorsement that you can imagine. And so whatever it is to be, whatever we decide it means to be a human being, it seems to me that we're encouraged to think that it's going to look a lot like this, like ordinary embodied human existence and interaction and engagement with both each other and with the natural world. And that, I mean, that makes a difference, because all of a sudden you have a sort of standard against which you can begin to answer these questions about what about this or that technology, because basically, does it help? Is the technology helping us to be more engaged with each other, more vividly present to each other? Is it helping us to engage with reality, with created nature? And if it is, great. I mean, I think that's to be celebrated. But of course, often the answer is no. We realize that many of the technologies that we're surrounded by are actually are getting in the way of our embodied interactions, and actually making it more and more difficult to engage or even experience created nature. And for Christians, I think the alarm bell should be going off. It's like, no, that's not God's intended purpose for the world. That's not the kingdom of God. So that's what I would, along those lines, that's how I would say, or what I would say.
Thank you. Before we open for questions, I wondered if you could also just say maybe a couple words on like what led you to write the book and what sort of that process looked like for you. And also, if I guess any comments too on how it's been received over the last year or so since it came out, and what sort of conversations it's led to.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you're a professor of interdisciplinary studies, my interest has been on understanding and interpreting modernity and modern society. My doctoral degree was in sociology. I studied with a fellow named Peter Berger, who was one of the key sort of American theorists of modernization and the impact of modernization upon religion. So that has led me to try and make sense of modernity, and so there are all kinds of ways you can approach that. I mean, I've approached it by way of economics. I'm currently working on political issues, but technology is obviously a big feature of modernity, and so I've been reading around the area of technology for a long time, and taught a course at Regent on Christianity and modern technology for many years, and I don't know, finally felt like I had something to say, and yeah, thankfully it seems to have spoken to people, and in general the response has been positive. The whole COVID thing, I was doing a lot of interviews and a lot of various things up until around the end of last year, and then I think with COVID hitting, there hasn't been much. Um, I'm currently working on a task force with the Anglican Church of North America, trying to figure out this whole issue of online liturgy, and whether uh, it's even conceivable to offer the sacraments in a virtual environment, those sorts of things. So, um, yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. Um, let's go ahead and open it up for questions then. I think to get things going, Elizabeth and Emily had some questions that arose during the book group.
Okay.
So if you guys want to go ahead and go, and then I'll just open it for anyone else who'd like to ask anything.
Yeah, actually, since the topic of COVID came up, one question I was wondering about is the fact that it seems that on one hand, during these last 6 months, technology has allowed us to communicate with each other, to continue many aspects of our lives to a greater degree than we would be able to even 5 or 10 years ago. But on the flip side, I know a lot of us are feeling um, very dissatisfied with this way of living. It's also made us acutely aware of how important interactions with other people are, and how important these aspects of our lives that we don't do remotely are. So just wondering how the last 6 months have sort of changed or grown any of the opinions in your book, if it's causing you to look at anything in a new light.
Uh, well, I mean, it's the kind of thing you wish you'd foreseen, and you could have included more of this in the book. But no, I mean, I'm glad to hear your comments, because I think that's what most of us have found, and most of the people that I've talked to have found, have had a similar reaction, that it's, we're grateful for it. Regent College, for example, where I work, we have been able to continue over the last 6 or 8 months because of this technology that we have, and that's good, because the alternative was dire. I mean, it was basically just shutting the thing down. So I'm grateful for it. On the other hand, I think most of the people I've talked to feel like you do, that gosh, this isn't anywhere near as good as actually meeting in person and being together. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm kind of hoping that it will make people realize that actually being together face to face is 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 precious, and um, worth cultivating, worth pursuing, or not pursuing, but celebrating, I guess is a better word. Um, so we'll see. I don't know. I mean, there'll be lots of interesting research that'll come out, I think, on the impact of this um, on people and on the development of social skills. I mean, some of the interesting comments that I've heard are that um, social interaction is a learned behavior, and it's something that has to be practiced, or it atrophies, just like most things. And um, the impact of this technology on people, it's been suggested that the impact of the technology on people is to render them, well, how do you put it, out of practice when it comes to personal interaction, face-to-face personal interaction. So people are more impatient, they're less empathetic, they find it harder to maintain conversations, stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see if that um, if that's sort of the aftermath of this use of the technology. But again, that just underscores the importance of staying in practice, of being together, and maintaining the conversations that enable us to live and thrive. Yeah. Um, Yeah, I mean that's all the reflection I have on it. Yeah, let's leave it at that. So good question though. Thank you.
Oh, I can ask the next question. So
Great.
thank you for putting these thoughts in the book. This question kind of is about suffering. So I think you discuss in here that Christians should see that suffering is valuable, and not to avoid it, right? But technology seems to try to give us comfort and lets us kind of avoid suffering. So that's on one side. But then on another side, you discuss that a negative consequence of technology is that it produces these new ways in which we're suffering. Like it basically makes us suffer in different ways. And how can we think about this tension or maybe try to resolve it?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. It's a hard one. Um, with respect to your last comments, I think um, technology is a human work, and it suffers from the thorns and thistles, as I call them, of unintended consequences, just like all other human works. Um, so, I mean, that shouldn't surprise us, right? I mean, we try to alleviate problems with technology, but inevitably, even the good that we do is accompanied by often unintendedly negative consequences as well. So that's a feature of human existence post fall. I think in the book I refer to Martin Luther and his theology of the cross and his notion that it is precisely in our suffering where we meet God. Albert Borgman makes a similar point from a Catholic point of view. It's slightly different. And I think that theology is worth pondering, worth remembering. I mean, I think it probably is true. At the same time, we're encouraged in Scripture to take care of each other, to love each other, to alleviate suffering. When and where that's possible. And technology plays an important role in that alleviation of suffering. So, I think it's a balance. I'm sure it's well. I would guess that there aren't principles that sort of enable us to answer every question, or at least tell us exactly what to do in every situation. But I think if Luther is correct, I think we're missing an opportunity to experience God and to learn from Him in our suffering. We're too quick to try to alleviate it, and of course, the modern message is that suffering is useless. It serves no purpose. It's an unequivocal evil that must be overcome at all costs, at any cost. Well, again, Christianly understood, I don't think that's true. So, yeah, does that help?
Yeah, it does. And I also am a person that wants to just, for convenience, just eliminate suffering whenever, but find that it is valuable. And then, but I guess I think we can try to, as you said, to kind of help our neighbor or love our neighbors, alleviate their suffering, but maybe in a way we don't need to make that the end goal to just make everybody feel better, or sorry, yeah, convenience is not the best, is not an ultimate goal.
I mean, I think you see this, this is a discussion they're having in the medical field, where, you know, we have the technology, for example, to keep people alive, even long after they basically should have died. But should we do that? And it's a dilemma. I'm not really sure how to answer it, but it's made people in the medical field refocus the discussion on not on alleviating or solving specific medical problems, but rather on the whole question of what does it mean to be healthy? What is health? And again, that's a really interesting question, and it's a much bigger and broader question than these other things that are reduced to technological problems. And once you refocus the discussion on health, then again you can start talking about, well, what does it mean to be a human? What does it mean to live fully as a human being? And where does technology come into that? Does it, you know, it obviously plays a role, but what kind of role? And, you know, anyway, I think that's interesting. And I know of people in that world that are having those discussions, and I think that's fruitful. Yeah, so thank you. Emily, what is it you're studying?
Well, I'm getting a PhD in computational linguistics, so I actually get to work on how do we, say, improve virtual assistants in understanding our speech.
Okay, there you go. That's turned out to be a tough problem, hasn't it?
Yeah, people thought language would be easy, but it's one of the most complex and beautiful things, I think, of being human.
Yeah. Good.
I'm going to call on Calvin for the next question, I think. So go ahead, Calvin.
Well, this will be a hard one.
Probably the least kind of abstract question, I guess. And thanks, Craig, for joining us, obviously, and just helping us think about technology and helping me think about technology. Just bringing a Christian perspective, just a framework as well. So we live in a city, Seattle, and are on a university campus, the University of Washington, that's very dominated by the presence of big tech, obviously. So just kind of real nitty gritty, just pastorally, just what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's either working in big tech or considering working for big tech? Because I think a lot of our folks are thinking academia, but those who aren't, probably big tech is kind of is what's there. So yeah, just kind of what sort of advice would you give to somebody in that setting or considering that setting?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I suppose it depends on where they are in the scheme of things. You know, I think some of these companies are good companies to work for. Others, you know, not so much. I've not heard very good things about Amazon. Facebook tends to be fairly intense. On the other hand, there are other companies that have a reputation for treating their people well, and, you know, for creating an environment that is good. I mean, I guess maybe that would be my advice to somebody looking into this, is to look for the culture of the company, and not just at the salary line, because in the long run, it's the culture that will, you know, make your life, I don't know, it will make your life good, and not the money. So, you know, back in the day when I worked for my dad's company when I was, you know, in my early 20s, and everybody knew the companies in Silicon Valley of that era that were not, you know, that had ruthless corporate cultures and, you know, weren't very pleasant places to work. And and then there were others that really were, and they were good places. And I think it was almost always a better choice to work for one of the good companies than one of the others. I don't know. I mean, you know, I guess I was just watching this new Netflix documentary that's come out recently called The Social Problem. I think that's what it's called. But it's interviews with all of these, you know, guys who have been in the tech world at a very high level. You know, the developers and designers at Facebook and Google and whatnot. And they're pretty troubled by big tech and the directions it's going. So somehow there's got to be a way to turn this ship around, or at least to try to turn this thing around. It won't be easy, but I believe that, you know, Jim Packer, who was our professor of theology at Regent College for many years, he had an old saying. He said that, you know, the Christian life, and specifically Christian ethics, is always a question of trying to make the best out of a bad situation. That's always the situation we're in, anywhere in this fallen world. But so the two aspects of that. First of all, you expect this situation to be bad, right? Of course it is. But at the same time, there's always a way to make the best of it, from a Christian point of view. And so the task is to try and figure out, okay, how to do that. Where is there room to move? Jacques Ellul said something very similar in a lot of his stuff on technology, that, you know, in spite of how much this technology appears to control our lives and control everything, there's always room for free human action. Anywhere you are, there's always room, and maybe not much, but there'll be a little, and that's where you want to figure out where that is, and then you want to try and make the best of it, take advantage of it. And I think, you know, if you're working in the tech world, that's your task. That's really your task in any situation that you find yourself in. So, yeah.
Thanks so much, Craig. That's really helpful.
You bet.
So, I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. We don't want to keep you too long, Craig, but if anyone else here wants to ask a question, now would be the time. Laura.
Thank you so much, Craig, for talking to us. I wasn't part of the book group who read your book, so I was glad that I got to hear your little spiel and get the highlight reel. Anyway, I have a nitty-gritty question about words because I'm an English PhD student. You say that modern technology is drawing us away from ordinary embodied existence. And I'm interested in that word ordinary and why, like what it means in your context and what it adds to your definition. And is there a different kind of embodied existence that modern technology isn't drawing us away from? Or do you just mean like it's drawing us away from embodied existence in this kind of a body as opposed to like on a server, which I suppose would just be a different kind of embodied existence? I guess,
yeah.
What does the word ordinary add to your definition?
No, I'm glad you asked. It's a tough question, but it's a good one. I was just trying to figure out how to express well, and I'm trying to figure out a different word to use instead of ordinary. Normal, but that normal is even worse, I think. But just face to face, you know, the kinds of things we do with each other, being together, speaking to each other in each other's presence, sharing a meal together around a table, walking together, doing things. This is the kind of ordinary embodied experience that I was concerned to defend.
Okay, so sorry, I just want to clarify. So we could have embodied experience that is not ordinary if we were all like the people in Wall-E who are still in their bodies but spend their whole lives looking at screens. If we all lived in little rooms and didn't see people, just zoomed with people and communicate with people on social media, then in that sense that would be embodied experience without being ordinary embodied experience. Is that what you're?
Yeah, no,
I mean,
that's
why the word ordinary is important to the definition.
yeah, and I don't know that it works, right? I wish it worked better than it did, because I've had this same question come up a number of times. Why the word ordinary, and what would extraordinary be, and that kind of thing. So I'm not sure it works very well, but that's what I was trying to get at. That rather than feeling like, the fact that you and I, when we're in each other's presence, we can't really multitask as we're trying to have a conversation with each other. I mean, we can't interact with 10 other people at the same time. We can't, and all of that can seem like a limitation. It's like, gee, wouldn't it be better to be able to converse with any number of people all at once, all the time? And I think, no, actually it would not. It would be worse. Like, it's not a limitation. This is where life happens, where you and I are just together, and we're able to converse and experience each other's presence and be attentive to each other, to the exclusion of all of the other stuff that's going on around us. That's not a problem to be solved. That's something to be celebrated. That's where life is. And so, yeah, I don't know how you say it, but that's what I meant by the word ordinary.
Thank you.
Yep.
Maybe one more question. Diane.
Thank you. Thank you for your talk. I was wondering if you've had any experience of trying to raise this issue in the secular public sphere, because like your thoughts are very much rooted in the Christian thinking and doctrines, for example, like what it means to be human, and even the question of suffering. The way you approach these questions are very much Christological and very Christ-centered. And I was wondering if you've had experience trying to communicate this issue in the secular sphere, and how, if you do, if you have, then how it went, how you navigated.
Yeah, that's a good question. No, I mean, that simple answer is no, I haven't. And I mean, the book is explicitly Christian. My audience, my concern, the audience that I was concerned to address were Christians in churches. No, I think a lot of these same things are being, a lot of the same concerns are being expressed in the secular context by people who are not Christians. I mean, you see this in this documentary film, for example, The Social Problem. I mean, these are, as far as I know, they're not people of faith. They're all very concerned about all of the things that I am also concerned about in my book. They just don't know what to do with it. They don't know where to go with it. And you see it in their faces. There's a kind of desperation there. What are we going to do? So anyway, well, that's, yeah. So the answer is no. I haven't gotten any calls from any secular media outlets wanting to interview me about my book. Who knows? Maybe that will happen, but it hasn't happened yet.
I hope it happens soon.
Thank you.
Craig, would you be up for one more question, actually?
Sure.
Okay. I think Aaron had an interesting one. So
Is it? I guess my question is, so in the book, there's sort of two different types of problems. So on the one hand, there's the more general problems of technology that it can be harmful, like social media or other sort of things that everyone kind of agrees, regardless of whether they're Christian or not, sort of agrees is like negative aspects of technology. But I'm more interested in this other sort of aspect of the uniquely Christian sort of, I guess, problems with technology, and how you would suggest how we can worship and live as Christians in a more embodied way that isn't just like the sort of obvious ones that everyone agrees on, but is more a uniquely Christian approach.
No, it's great. It's a good question. I mean, that's the whole point of the last couple of chapters of the book, is to try and answer it. Because I think Christians, we do have an anthropology, a theology of what it means to be human. And we also have a theology of creation that tells us that our task as human beings in the world is to take care of the world, to represent God within it. And that requires, well, not requires, if we took that seriously, if we were able to together start to take that seriously, it would make a huge difference. Christians have been slow, for example, to get on the environmental bandwagon. And actually, there are many North American churches that continue to resist even considering actually a Christian issue, the issue of global warming, the issue of climate change, all of these things. These are profoundly important things that Christians need to be thinking about and addressing in public and elsewhere. All of this flows out of basic theology of creation and a Christian anthropology. So, I mean, the short answer to your question is that I'd like to see Christians living out the implications of basic Christian beliefs and exploring those beliefs in respect to the economy, technology, et cetera, et cetera. So, I don't know, does that answer the question? I mean, you got to go back and read those chapters, because that's the whole point, that's the thrust of them.
Thanks for the answer.
You bet.
Well, let's go ahead and close it there. Thank you, Craig, again so much for taking the time to talk with us. I think, yeah, I just know personally, so I read I'm a computer scientist or studying computer science, and I read your book about a year ago and found it very helpful. And through going through it again with a discussion group and now hearing your thoughts, really appreciate the effort you've put into this, and yeah, just the way you've been approaching these issues from a Christian perspective. So
Well,
thank you again for your time.
Yeah, you bet.